So today I want to talk about free speech. And the reason why is because recently it seems like everyone's trying to seize on the opportunity of Charlie Kirk being assassinated. And the most troubling actions that I've seen are ones that are trying to essentially regulate the speech of other people that do not agree with them. And the biggest problem I have with that is that, as the saying goes, free speech means you agree with speech from everyone, especially people that you do not agree with. And although certain people have expressed glee in Charlie Kirk's assassination, and again, I think these people are deeply troubled and have mental problems and should probably seek help. Well, the fact of the matter is they should still be allowed to say what they want. And in previous videos, I've kind of talked around it, right? But I think the most important thing is directly calling it out when you see the government making direct statements that they want to do some of the same infringements on free speech that the previous administration were doing. And so what I want to do is I want to take a look at Tucker Carlson's Charlie Kirk tribute video that he did. He brought on a few people. I think it was really well put together. I suggest taking a look at it for yourself if you're interested. But I'm going to take a look specifically at the free speech portion of it, and then give some of my thoughts as well, because some of the actions that I'm seeing are very deeply troubling.
But I also think it's important to explain why that mattered to him. It was not abstract in any sense. It was central. It was the core, because consider what it means if you don't respect free speech, which is another way of saying free conscience, the right of other people to make up their own minds about the basic questions of what is right or wrong, and to express their views on those issues. If you don't...
And just to interject really quick there, I 100% agree with that, and that's why I'm making this video, is because I enjoy, if you don't think critically about the things that you're doing and the conclusions that you come to, you essentially are just following, and I think so many people do this nowadays, where they pick a side and then they literally just follow everything top to bottom. There's no actual thought about why they believe the things they do. It's how people tie themselves into knots to try and defend positions that make there's no ideological consistency with the things that they're espousing. And the only reason that you get to a point like that is that you don't think about things for yourself. You literally just follow, hey, this is everything that my party believes in, so this is everything that I'm going to believe in. And again, the thing about that is it is good for you to be able to try and break out of that bubble, to have conversations with people you do not agree with. Calm, level-headed conversations, and you don't shout them down, and you don't walk away from them, and you don't get pissed off, and that way you understand where they're coming from, and maybe they're able to make a good point that, although it may not completely switch you into their camp, may soften your ideas and where you stand on things. And I think that's one of the most important things about having conversations with people you don't agree with, and allowing people that you don't agree with to have conversations with you and express their ideas without trying to essentially just shut them up. So again, just want to double down on what he's saying here, that it is, I think, the most important thing to being able to move forward in this country and not come to something like a civil war or something else equally as tragic and unnecessary in the future.
Don't acknowledge the right of other people to do that. And if you take steps to prevent them from doing that, what are you really saying? You're really saying, I don't think you have a soul. I think you're a meat puppet I can control. I think you're an animal, maybe sub-animal. You're a slave. You're a person to whom I can dictate belief.
And that's a good point too. And although I don't frame it in the religious context like he does here, it 100% shows that you don't care about that person and their opinions. If you won't listen to them, you don't care about that person. And to me, when something like that happens, well, then I'm not interested in being around you or being a friend of yours or really having anything to do with you. And it's not that I don't respect your opinions, it's that you don't respect me enough to listen to what I have to say. And you don't have to listen to all of it, right? I make these super long videos with rants, and I understand that's not everyone's cup of tea. But if you can't listen to, in essence, the things that I am saying and the things, and I think anyone should feel this way, you shouldn't want to be around people who do not respect you. And as I just established, if you are doing that to someone and you're not willing to listen to them, well, then you don't respect them. And especially if they can make their opinion known to you in a quick way. It doesn't have to be long and drawn out like I tend to do, especially in these videos. But if they can, hey, here's why I think something, you should be able to listen to that. I think people today have been so radicalized to not be willing to listen to the other person. And just know that if you do that, you're literally telling that person that you do not respect them. And in that instance, they shouldn't want to be your friend. You shouldn't have any friends if you can't listen to one person's opinion that differs from you. And you need to learn how to be, you need to be socialized. That's essentially what needs to happen. You're a dog that needs to be socialized. You need to learn, you need to go back to kindergarten and learn how to interact with people. Because that's how you're acting. You're acting like a selfish child. You're acting like an animal. You need to be able to listen to other people. And even if you don't really have an open mind, which I would hope that you do, you need to not shout them down. You need to not walk away from them. You need to not be unwilling to listen to the things that they have to say.
I don't acknowledge that you have the right to come to your own conclusion is another way of saying I don't acknowledge that you're a human being. It's dark. There's nothing darker than that. And trust me, they believe it. The ones who've thought about it. And there are a lot of those. But for a lot of people, particularly those who are just repeating what they think they should say or responding to the momentary rage of the moment, they just throw stuff out. And we've got to hope that the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, is in that category. She said this just yesterday. Watch.
And real quick, before we go into her statements, and that is the thing too, is there does need to be some amount of understanding that when something traumatic happens to someone, and I think this is one of the things that made me more disappointed with people who expressed glee in Charlie Kirk's assassination, is you're doing it as a snap reaction while others are grieving. And the problem with that is then those people are going to feel like you're rubbing it in their faces. And so then it's more likely that they are going to have a snap reaction against you. And if you take nothing else away, it's that is disrespectful, not just to the person who was assassinated and his family, but also to those people who are grieving what happened. And even though you might not like the person who was assassinated, do you not have any sort of empathy for the people who are grieving? Because that's essentially what you're saying by having a snap reaction and voicing it online the way that so many people did. And you're totally justified in having those opinions and voicing them, but there is a time and a place, well, for celebrating the assassination of someone who just tried to promote respectful discourse again, you may not agree with some of his takes, but you should at least understand that the direction that he was going and what he was trying to push towards was to try and help the country. And I would bet if you actually went in and listened to especially some of his more recent conversations and some of his debates and some of his appearances on other people's podcasts or his own podcast, you probably would like some of the things he says. And the problem is no one is going to agree or disagree 100% with all of the things someone says. And if you do, you just are not a critical thinker. But that's just kind of what I want to say, but we'll get into Pam Bondi's comments here.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
And the thing about hate speech, this is literally the playbook from the Biden administration. And I laughed at it. And the next thing they're going to be telling us is that, oh, there's malinformation. Like, this is literally the playbook from the previous administration. And so hate speech, and actually, if you watched my free speech video about England, these are the types of laws that they put in place in England to jail 4,000 people for social media posts. Because what they said hurt someone's feelings. So I push back on this voraciously. And quite frankly, it makes me look stupid that I went out and said I was glad that Trump got in because he essentially pushed off the speech regulation and censorship that the Biden administration was executing. So again, when I saw this the first time, I pretty much lost my mind. I can't believe that this is where we are, where now they're using a national tragedy to roll out hate speech language, using that to try and censor us.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. This is the Attorney General of the United States, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States, telling you that there is this other category called hate speech, and of course the implication is that's a crime. There's almost no sentence that Charlie Kirk, and I'm not running the risk of appropriating his memory for my own ends by saying this, it's provable. There's no sentence that Charlie Kirk would have objected to more than that. And you've got to think the Attorney General didn't think it through and was not attempting to desecrate the memory of the person she was purporting to celebrate, that she just threw that out there, that she hadn't thought about it. You hope that. You hope that Charlie Kirk's death won't be used by a group we now call bad actors.
And what Tucker is pointing out here is factually correct. All during the last administration, that's what Charlie Kirk was trying to speak out on. In fact, I was watching a video recently where he was saying that, oh yeah, he was putting up some of the early videos of him having the campus debates. And just the title alone, it would essentially get censored because it was dunking on woke liberals. And so, of course, he's going to decry any sort of censorship, especially censorship for him or in the guise of preserving his name and his memory. That is completely disgusting. And given Pam Bondi's station and her role, she should know better than to do something like that. And in fact, I would call that every single person go and decry this as much as you can online. Because we need to show that this is completely unacceptable.
To create a society that was the opposite of the one he worked to build. You hope that. You hope that a year from now, the turmoil we're seeing in the aftermath of his murder won't be leveraged to bring hate speech laws to this country. And trust me, if it is, if that does happen, There is never a more justified moment for civil disobedience than that, ever, and there never will be. Because if they can tell you what to say, they're telling you what to think, there is nothing they can't do to you because they don't consider you human. They don't believe you have a soul. A human.
And that I agree with. And normally, I totally disagree with any sort of... I've always held the belief that most people that go to protests are just 99% of them are not even worth talking to. And part of that is informed by like Channel 5, right? Where they go out and they have conversations with people at protests, and every single one of them just sounds like the dumbest person. But in the case that they tread on the First Amendment, or they try to, it's no longer just one party, it's both parties. And in that instance, I would never call for it in any other circumstance, but that is the red line where we say no more. And I think everyone needs to be lockstep on that. Because that is how you end up with a tyrannical government. That is how you end up with governments that silence their citizens. That is how you can no longer express your dislike with the things that are going on and put any pressure on the government at all. Because you can have your passport revoked, because you can get sued, because you have no more free speech, you have no recourse, and then you may as well go live in China or North Korea or anywhere else that you're not allowed to say anything negative against the leader or the government. It is foundational. Freedom of speech is foundational to our country. And every single person, regardless of right or left, needs to stand up for it. No matter how you feel about recent events, that is the most important thing.
Being with a soul, a free man, has a right to say what he believes, not to hurt other people, but to express his views. And by the way, that thinking, and not to pile on the Attorney General, who's a very nice person, but that thinking that she just articulated on camera there is exactly what got us to a place where some huge and horrifying percentage of young people think it's okay to shoot people you disagree with, to kill Nazis for saying things they don't like. Why do they believe that? How did we get here? Is it the video games? Is it the SSRIs? Yeah, probably. But what it really is 12 and then 16 years of indoctrination in our schools at the hands of people who tell them that, who say...
And not just that, in the media. Because the thing is, when you're growing up and every single day, say you have a CNN parent or even a Fox News parent, and every day you hear that such and such, this person is a fascist, this person is a Nazi, this person is a communist, and then you learn about in school what an actual Nazi is, what an actual fascist is, what an actual communist is. Your mind does not have the ability at that age to differentiate between being hyperbolic and what is actually the reality of the situation. And so when you're hearing that over and over and over again, that is what actually radicalizes. That is brainwashing. That is what these figures are doing. And so it has to be, like, the rhetoric just needs to be calmed down. And if you are listening to anything that calls anyone any of those terms, fascist, Nazi, communist, you need to find a new source of news. Because what you are watching is not objective. And by watching, you may not think it has any sort of influence on how you think, but it 100% does. And if you hear it every single day, it has a brainwashing effect. That is why I try to seek out middle of the road, or where I can hear both perspectives, or people who have calmer heads. And the moment I hear any sort of editorialized language, hyperbolic editorialized language, I flee that media immediately. Because I do not want to, if you hear it over and over, you get brainwashed to think in that direction. And I do not want that. And you should not want that either.
Exactly what the Attorney General just said. Well, there's free speech, which of course we all acknowledge is important, so important. But then there's this thing called hate speech. Hate speech, of course, is any speech that the people in power hate, but they don't define it that way. They define it as speech that hurts people, speech that is tantamount to violence. And we punish violence, don't we? Of course we do. They've been taught that every year of their lives. And so naturally, most of them believe it. So when Charlie Kirk is shot in the throat with a 30-06 on camera, I doubt very many young Americans want to see something like that or actually applaud the death of a man, a father, a husband. But they've been told for their entire lives in schools exactly what Pam Bondi just told them. Well, there's free speech, but then there's also hate speech, and woe to those who engage in it because it's a crime. That's a lie. And it's a lie that denies the humanity of the people you're telling it about. And so any attempt to impose hate speech laws in this country, and trust me, there are a lot of people who would like them. There are a lot of people who'd like to codify their own beliefs by punishing those under the U.S. Code who disagree with their beliefs. Any attempt to do that is a denial of the humanity of American citizens and cannot be allowed under any circumstances. That's got to be the red line. Because again, when they can do that, what can't they do? And this is something, by the way, that Charlie thought about a lot and that I had.
And that's exactly my point, is if you are no longer to call out when they're doing awful things, the awful things will just get worse and worse. Imagine if we could not express our displeasure about what is going on in Gaza. It already seems like they're running us over and totally disregarding us. But imagine how much worse it would be. They wouldn't just do whatever they want. We would do whatever Israel wants. That's the world that we would be in. And that is why I say freedom of speech is the most important. Because at least now they can register that we do not agree with what they are doing. They can see it is massively unpopular. But if they couldn't, if they didn't have to deal with that and answer at least somewhat to us, what do you think would actually be happening? And that is why I am making this video. Because it needs to be said. And you need to call out the side that is in power now and capable of enacting these types of policies. You need, and if you're on the right, you need to call it out, especially when it is your party. Because when it comes from the left, no one cares. Because it just looks like you're being a doomer and, oh no, the other side is, because it's not in your interest. But when it is in your interest, such as coming down on someone who is saying something offensive to you, well, if you stand up to enacting hate speech or other laws that would go after the people that you disagree with, well, then your argument has more volition. You're not arguing from a place of disadvantagement. You're arguing from a place of strength. And therefore, your argument has more weight and people will pay attention to it more. So the people that need to be decrying this the most are those on the right. And I would call you to do that. Not for the good of you, not for the good of me, for the good of everyone. This is not a country that I would want to live in if there was no free speech. And it seems very apparent that we are going down that path now. All right, and that was just a short chunk of it, right? I just wanted to make sure that it had he made a bunch of good points. And so that's why I wanted to cover it, because I thought his points were good and it gave me kind of a springboard to talk about the things that I wanted to talk about. But the other things that I do want to call out is, number two, the clip of Pam Bondi was short, but she also mentioned a ministry of truth, which is literally from the playbook of the Biden administration. So that needs to be called out. That needs to be killed immediately. We cannot and should not use a tragedy to then push forward some sort of censorship. And like I said, literally from the playbook of the Biden administration, we need to say absolutely not. It is not acceptable. And she tried to walk back the comments because she did get a lot of pushback, but we need to continue and say never. Do not try and pull this on us. And most recently, there was also something that happened where Jimmy Kimmel, because of some comments that he had made, which were factually inaccurate, and they were just stupid. They were stupid comments about how the right was trying to do anything they could to make it look like the assassin was not MAGA, which is just factually inaccurate. I don't think he thought he was MAGA. I don't think his boyfriend thought he was MAGA, his trans boyfriend. I don't think, whatever. It's provably false that he was not a MAGA Republican. However, now his show has been canceled. And the reason why is because Trump and his cabinet basically were threatening Disney and the other companies, CBS and all of these companies, that they would have a tougher time having mergers and acquisitions carried out, and a bunch of other thinly veiled threats of this kind. And although I think what Jimmy Kimmel said was stupid, well, everyone can call him out and roast him, and maybe he'll do better next time. Or people stop watching him, his show fails organically. Just like Bud Light, where they said, hey, we get it now, we screwed up. Same thing could happen here, where you just do not watch his show, it goes away. Although Bud Light didn't completely go away, they learned their lesson. And the same thing could happen here. The market decides what is acceptable and not the government. And once again, I do not agree with what Jimmy Kimmel said. I don't care about his show. I haven't watched late night television since Letterman. Maybe. I couldn't even tell you. I think it's a cesspool. I think they're all ideologically captured, just like the rest of Hollywood. But they shouldn't have their show canceled based on their poor opinions. And again, I greatly dislike the things that he's saying and the propaganda that these spaces have been propagating, but they shouldn't be canceled because of their stupid views. And so I just wanted to make this video. Again, if you cannot tell, freedom of speech is something I am very passionate about, because going all the way back to the very beginnings of MySpace, I have always had different viewpoints and I've wanted to express them. And some of them may have been unpopular. But the thing is, I should have the right to say them. And anytime I would think about it, I think whatever the universe, God, whatever's out there, I think that I ended up in the United States where I'm able to express those opinions and not be thrown in jail or assassinated or whatever. And I think everyone needs to understand the importance of freedom of speech. And that is why, again, I am making this video, to hopefully call people into action, especially people on the right. You cannot celebrate when freedom of speech is infringed upon. And the reason why I'm calling out to people on the right is that I believe they are still the more rational party. So please listen to what I'm saying. The left is going to decry it anyway, but you need to stand up to it as well, because otherwise, in 4 years, it's going to come for you. Anyway, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in more of my content, drop a subscription below. It really does help out. Given the importance of this, I normally don't ask this, but if you have found this video compelling, I would ask that you please share it on whatever social media platform you have. I think this is a vital message that I want to get out to the maximum number of people possible. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.